Andrew, welcome to the program. We're going to be talking about the Port Arthur massacre. It's like the ultimate shooting debacle in Australian history, which, much like almost every shooting debacle that happens in every other country, New Zealand's had them, America's had them, they just get used to demonise all gun owners, and were probably most likely false flag attacks in and of themselves to begin with that were orchestrated in order to get people's guns. So welcome to the program, and I really want to learn a bit more about this.
I was a member of the Victoria Police Force from 68 till 85. I retired in health in 1985 after running into some problems with a thing called corruption.
That'll do it.
Every time. When the Port Arthur massacre finally came round, and I can remember listening to the radio on the car when it was first announced, about a gunman going mad, and I turned the radio off in disgust because I knew it was going to be psyched up. Later on, I came round to study it. I got a copy of the court transcript where Martin Bryant was sentenced. Martin Bryant was never put on trial, and he should have been. The solicitor, John Avery, took over. Now, John Avery also represented Carleen Bryant, Martin Bryant's mother, and the gun dealer, Terry Hill. Now, it's extremely interesting with the gun dealer because shortly before Avery took over for Bryant, Avery had written to Terry Hill asking him to give evidence that he had sold the murder weapons to Martin Bryant, which was a lie. And Terry Hill declined to tell this particular lie, and so the police ended up raiding his shop and closed his business down, collected all his books. You start reading the sentencing document, and you're absolutely amazed. You then start reading the witness statements, and they are absolutely astounding. The first thing you find out is that according to the police documents, when David and Sally Martin were killed at between 10:30 and 12 o'clock, that Martin Bryant was 58 kilometres away drinking coffee, as per the witness statement. You've got witnesses stating that Martin Bryant arrived at the Seascape Cottage, which was the first and the final scenes, at 12:30. Again, sort of thing, the shootings were heard by other witnesses from Seascape Cottage from 10:40 a.m. And that's from 4 different witnesses. So you've got major problems with the police evidence, and you can understand why the whole Tasmanian government, the Australian federal government, all required Martin Bryant to plead guilty, which John Avery was finally able to coerce Martin Bryant to do so simply by getting Martin Bryant's mother to go in and tell Martin if he didn't plead guilty, then neither she nor Martin's sister would ever be able to visit him at Brisbane Prison. Nobody's permitted to speak to Martin Bryant. That was made perfectly clear in an article by Gary Linnell in the Bulletin in about 1998.
Oh, come on. Even Charles Manson was allowed to have people talk to him, and he was a knowing mass murderer.
No, well, Martin Bryant, his mother got one visit to him, and she asked him if he'd actually did these things at Port Arthur, and he said it must have been a police setup. And after that, he became too agitated, and she was frightened to ask him anything further.
Define police setup. What evidence do we have that there was police present? Was there any reports of multiple shooters, things of that nature?
There were reports of multiple shooters. I've named the main shooter at Seascape Cottage to be Sergeant Michael Charles Dyson of the Tasmania Police Special Operations Group. the shooter at the Port Arthur Historic Site as being Benjamin Overbeek, and I stated that quite emphatically, and nobody sued me as yet.
What are those gentlemen's background? Do they have military training or just police training?
The shooter at the Port Arthur Historic Site was a 20-year-old. I don't know what actual training he had. There's no record of him being in the Australian Army. But the person inside who did the shooting at the Port Arthur had been very properly trained. You could people saw him moving around and pirouetting when he was shooting inside the cafe. He certainly knew how to handle firearms. The shooting at the Port Arthur Historic Site had to take place at 1:30, but it was supposed to take place on the ferry. It didn't, because the timetable had changed. So the gunmen then took out the patrons in the Broad Arrow Cafe, which was supposed to be a secure site. And the first Australian spook to get shot was Anthony Nightingale, who jumped up and shouted, "No, no, not here." And immediately got shot in the throat. People will argue that how do you know that Anthony Nightingale was a spook? Well, his job was listed here as a loans officer for the Commonwealth Bank stationed at Noble Park. That doesn't prove anything. But then you get another Commonwealth employee who was at the site at the time and these all people are supposedly on holidays. Lynn Beavers, she later on in about 2002 sued her employees, the Commonwealth Bank and Audiometrics of 814 Hawthorne Road, Burke Road, Hawthorne, sued them for injuries she sustained when she had to go inside the Broad Arrow Cafe to identify other Commonwealth Bank employees. And the only Commonwealth Bank employee that was inside the Broad Arrow Cafe and was dead was Anthony Nightingale. So that immediately tells you that A, they were working at the time, and B, they had to be spooks. Every time there is a gun agenda, there's massacres. There's loading up gun massacres. Now that tells you it has to be a political agenda, nothing else, because people don't erupt spontaneously and go out and do things on a political line. Christopher Ramos is a professional witness. We've had them at the Port Arthur Massacre. We've had them at the London bombing. We've had them at 9/11. These are people who immediately come out and give the right agenda. Or when something goes wrong, they need to negate proper evidence. They'll come out and give the required evidence. And when you have a look at the Sandy Hook Massacre, again, you've got these professional witnesses, people who will come out and give the required line, and you listen to it later on, you say, that's not correct with what I've already heard. You get professional witnesses, and they're rather easy to identify once you know what you're looking for.
Well, specifically, what are you looking for when you're looking for these witnesses?
Well, the first thing is they know too much, and they apparently see too much. Now, if you're at a shooting, the first thing you do is you put your head down sort of thing, you start looking for an escape route. So with Christopher Ramos, where he sees the gunman spraying this, he sees the bloke next to him being shot, he's seeing too much. Christopher Ramos, and when most people speak and they need to stop or get their thoughts back in order, they use the R pause. I've got to tell you this, but Christopher Ramos, when he was doing his speaking, used the words just and like to fill in for the R, so he never stopped talking. He's been trained to speak without pausing, without giving the media head a chance to interrupt his presentation.
Welcome back to the Vinnie Eastwood Show. Final segment we have with Andrew McGregor, former Victorian police, retired, and he's talking about massacres, gun shooting massacres, and trained professional people coming on. Now, you were talking about some form of witness who came up while he was allegedly on holiday wearing a suit. Now, I don't know about you, ladies and gentlemen, but when I'm on holiday, I barely wear any clothes at all, let alone a fracking suit.
The other thing that was very interesting was his wife was about 7 months pregnant. Now, how many people would actually travel on an aircraft when they're 7 months pregnant? Do aircraft permit people in such a condition to fly?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I thought you're not allowed to.
No, if she starts giving birth on a plane, sort of thing, it's a major problem for the air crew and for the safety of the child. She's not supposed to. But Robin Atkins, with her husband, they're 7 months pregnant. He's on the time. He's talking about the police present at Port Arthur, and there was none. He's talking about how good everything was, and it was rubbish, and he knew too much. And so once you put it all together and read it properly, there's only one conclusion you can come to. He was a professional witness. He was down there on the spot. Another witness that was at the Port Arthur historic site was John Radler. Now, John Radler was the head guy of CNN in Australia, and he was down there at Hobart at the time. And he was preparing to give the news briefing of what happened at Port Arthur. And CNN had given him 3 days for the Port Arthur massacre. Now, what's so important about Australia to CNN that they're given 3 days interviewing at this time on the CNN radio? Please tell me, or CNN News. Why would CNN have 3 days available for John Radler in regard to the Port Arthur massacre?
Go on.
How about if you lost 70 American tourists killed down there? Then Bill Clinton and Hillary would have been bringing in their 1994 hit list sort of thing and attacking the Second Amendment by the State Department, because they'd force Australia to bring in gun laws, and then those gun laws would be reciprocated in America. And that took place in 1996, and that was what the Port Arthur massacre was all about. One thing about the Port Arthur massacre, Martin Bryant was never trained. The gunman was. Martin Bryant, when the first 2 people were supposedly murdered, that's David and Sally Martin, was 58 kilometres away drinking coffee. When I started giving my lectures in 2001 and stating how the gunman deliberately targeted and shot Mrs. Nanette Mekak and her 2 young daughters, people jumped at me. How dare I be so nasty? But the actual fact is that the part of the agendas for the gun thing is to murder women and children at schools. Have a look at the whole agenda. These blown-up gun massacres by our governments, that's America and Australia, have been, are quite prepared to murder innocent women and children. They're not even going after the men. They don't want the men. They're going after, we'll say, the highest form of trauma possible. It's take out the women and children. The people who are attacking you are your own government, be it Australian or be it American. It's not a foreign government that's attacking you, it's the own government. No matter what you believe, number one thing, if there's a gun massacre in a country, and that includes Norway, then that particular government has to run the massacre.
I think that's actually a nice cheery note to leave it on. Thank you, Andrew.